Brian Carriveau along with Luke Rodgers here at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, where on Thursday, Packers head coach Mike McCarthy and general manager Ted Thompson met with the media. And Luke, one of the topics Ted Thompson was asked about was the whether a window is closing in Green Bay. Do you think a window is closing for their chance to win another Super Bowl?
Brian, I think this has been a topic of conversation since 2010 when the Packers won that Super Bowl on the back of all those injuries and kind of survived that, ran the gauntlet from the 6th seed. I think the win was so impressive then that I think there was an overwhelming sense in the media and just an overwhelming opinion that the Packers had at least one or two more Super Bowls in them from that point. And here we are in 2016, different situation. We don't have, Packers haven't gotten a ring since then. And you've got your franchise quarterback, your highest paid player on your team, going into his 11th season. You got to think this window is closing. And I know we talked about this off camera earlier about how some teams you can see the sense of urgency in the decisions they make. And I think the Broncos are a perfect example. They knew they had a season, maybe half. They ended up having half a season with Peyton Manning, but maybe they had one season out of them, and they built that team around them. They filled with the free agents, and they're kind of juggling. And it's crazy things. They may end up keeping all their guys. They may end up being able to pay Von Miller and tag Malik Jackson, and then keep Brock Osweiler. So it can be done. I think there's a sense in the Packer fan community, and even with the analysts, you cover the Packers, and I'm a Packer fan, but also cover the NFL as a whole. That the sense of urgency in the personnel, transactional, acquisition stuff, like free agency. The urgency isn't there with Ted Thompson. And I know that there were some articles that came out here in the offseason, especially after the loss, that said that there was a differing of opinion between head coach Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson on the utilization of free agency and the development of talent. Ted has been a draft and develop guy. But how long can you draft and develop when your franchise player in the cornerstone of your franchise, your quarterback, is going to his 11th year? I mean, typically, and Peyton just won his 18th year he won the Super Bowl, but he wasn't the franchise quarterback that we knew, Peyton Manning we knew. So, there was a window that's closing.
So that leads us right into the next question. Do the Packers need to get involved in free agency come March?
It was funny, when Ted was asked this, he sidestepped it and talked about how, all options are always open. It's always an option. And then he kind of went back to Julius Peppers. I mean, and this is traditionally how he's been. It's been Charles Woodson. It's been a Julius Peppers. It's been a Ryan Pickett. And these guys have always been sort of basement bargain deals with a huge upside. So it's not costing the team a whole lot, and these guys paid off. The problem with that, though, is there aren't always those kind of deals that exist in the marketplace. And for what is it, 3-4 years now? I think it was 4 years ago there started to be a rumbling about A.J. Hawkins' ability at the middle linebacker position. And A.J. stayed another season and played, was serviceable. And love A.J. He just was, he was serviceable. He had reached his ceiling as a player. And in the last 2 years, that hole still hasn't been addressed. And you'd think for a team that wants to win now, and Ted has said it, and Mike has said it, they want to win now. It's about this year. Do you think you would address some of these obvious holes that you see as a fan, you see as an analyst, in the tight end spot as well? And I think they tried to address it with Richard Rodgers, but they didn't get dynamic sort of physical mismatch, imposing tight end they had like in Jermichael Finley. They got a steady, a good blocking guy. Guy's not going to beat anybody with speed. We talked about in our podcast together. We talked about how you get sick of the 2-yard flat play to Richard Rodgers. He's never going to break a tackle. So I think for me to become a believer that Ted really, really is open to free agency, it'd be nice to see him delve in, especially as this window closes. And the guys are there. The middle linebacker, inside linebacker position, you've got guys like Danny Trevathan, who the Broncos probably the odd man out they can't keep. You've got Jarrell Freeman. And, you also have the draft to address these things. So we'll see. And Ted's always been a value guy. He took Aaron at 24 in his first draft because he was the best player on the board. So you never really know what you're going to get with Ted Thompson. And as usual, the Packers head coach Mike McCarthy and the GM Ted Thompson said a lot, but really didn't say much.
Finally, one thing Mike McCarthy did say was he addressed the wide receiver situation, the health of Jordy Nelson, what Ty Montgomery's going to do in his second year in the NFL. How do you see the wide receiver position in Green Bay in 2016?
Well, it's deep, and I think if there is any silver lining in what happened this last season, it's that you got to see Jared Abbrederis play. You got to see Jeff Janis get on the field. So you have a better idea of what you have in those guys. And Janis was great in special teams, and a lot of people in Packer Nation were crying for more Jeff Janis and more Jeff Janis. But Mike especially was really high on Ty, and he talked about how he was as an athlete and what he did when he stepped on the field, how impressive he was, and then how he tried to fight through this injury until ultimately the last option was to have surgery. So Mike seemed very, very high, very complimentary of Ty Montgomery. And I think his expectations are very high coming into 2016. And I also think he commented about Davante Adams and how Davante kind of had his sophomore slump and alluded to the fact that Davante was playing injured a lot and that he had that injury thing and that everybody gets it and he just needed to fight through it. So if you take Mike at face value, you've got to think that Davante Adams is going to turn things around next season. You've got to think that Ty Montgomery is going to be a big plug back into that offense. And then, of course, Jordy Nelson returning. I know Mike said a few things about Jordy, including that there's a few guys he sees in the facility every day. It's LaTroy Guyan, it's Jordy Nelson, and I think he said Mike Neal are there every day. And he said Jordy looks good enough. You wouldn't even know he's hurt. He looks good to play right now. So that's great news if you're ready for the Packers. And Mike said he fully expects Jordy to be back. And Ted echoed this, Jordy to be back at 100% at the Jordy Nelson we know from 2014. The guy that takes the top off the defenses, the guy that's on the same page with Aaron, that guy is going to be back.
For Luke Rodgers, I'm Brian Carriveau at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Stay tuned to 24/7 Sports for more coverage.
All right, bud.